Hey everyone, and welcome to Talk ETFs, ETF.com's weekly video series. My name is Sumit Roy, and I'm Senior Analyst here at ETF.com. This week, I'm speaking with Will Rhind, who's the founder and CEO of GraniteShares. Will, great to have you on the show.
Great to be on the show, Sumit.
Absolutely. So, Will, I have to start off by asking you about Nvidia. This was the hottest stock of 2024, and entering 2025, it was doing quite well. But more recently, there's been a ton of volatility, first with China's DeepSeek. Now we're getting some market-related volatility. What's going on with Nvidia? Is the AI trade over?
It's definitely not over. I think that if anything, the recent earnings have just confirmed that the AI trade really is the cornerstone of this bull market. And in that thesis, Nvidia still is the most important stock. Great quarter's earnings. It's just we're in an environment right now where talks about macro incidents, whether it's war in Ukraine or probably more relevant to the markets, talks of tariffs are really affecting the market and volatility more than fundamentals. And that's why we've seen some volatility over the last, few weeks.
So, Will, NVDL is your largest ETF and your most popular single stock ETF, but I know you have a suite of many other single stock ETFs. Can you talk about some of the more popular ones and where there might be opportunities right now?
Yeah, I think, like I said, AI still, for me, is the cornerstone of this bull market. So crypto is up there too, but some of the bloom has come off that rose a little bit, and I would say still AI is the dominant theme. So within that, you have companies not in any particular order, but ones that have certainly been very popular on our platform at AMD. That one has been consistently popular. We've had that one out for a while, so 2 times AMD. Palantir, perhaps a more recent one. But we launched Palantir, 2x Palantir, just before Palantir went into the S&P 500 and before they switched their listing and then went into the NASDAQ 100. So that stock has just been on an absolute tear. And the performance of our 2x Palantir, PTIR, has been amazing. More recently, we've launched things like SMCI, Supermicro Computer, which is getting a huge amount of interest because that stock had some very specific corporate stuff going on, namely that they had an auditor that resigned. That put their listing on the NASDAQ in jeopardy. They hired a new auditor. They had a deadline until sometime, I think it was last week, to file some updated information, of which they sort of made it on the deadline. So there's been a lot of interesting news around that stock, which keeps people engaged. And then lastly, one that probably most people weren't thinking about until very recently, Intel. So we have 2x Intel. And again, that was probably the one AI stock that had been really left behind as all the focus went on Nvidia and AMD and others. So Intel had been really sort of beaten up, change in leadership, et cetera. And then just in the last really week or so, we've had some much more positive news, potentially about Intel partnering up with the likes of Taiwan Semiconductor, other massive names in the AI space, with a view to potentially Taiwan Semiconductor taking over their factories here in the US, making more investments, and therefore, the Intel story suddenly becomes a lot more interesting. So I think the news is that the stocks that are gaining the most traction, the most interest, definitely all have still that AI theme, probably linking them together. But crypto is definitely still of interest as well.
That's great. And you mentioned the super micro ETF. Well, the ticker symbol there is SMCL. I'm looking at the chart right now. It's been on an absolute roller coaster from $10 a share in early February. It rallied almost all the way up to $50 a share just 2 weeks later. Incredible volatility. And I'm sure a lot of traders really appreciate that volatility. So that's a great one if you're into
another one which is interesting, again relating to AI, but I think more of a macro one as well, is 2x Alibaba, which is the ticker code BABX. That again has been on a tear because of the Chinese, or the recovery in certain Chinese stocks, and particularly Chinese tech. I think DeepSeek as well. added a bit more of a positive spin in terms of people's thinking around where Chinese AI might be. So Babex is another one. That's a China story. It's an AI story, and obviously a real sort of bellwether in terms of Chinese technology. And that has also been performing very, very well over the last few weeks.
It's great you mentioned that because I'm looking right now, and Babex is actually the best performing US listed ETF of the year so far, with an incredible 122% year to date gain.
Yeah. Who would have thought, especially
Yeah.
probably even 6 months ago, would be talking about, Chinese stocks or Chinese tech being a bright spot at the moment.
Yeah, who would have thought? So we've talked a lot about volatile types of ETFs in your suite. Will, I want to now turn to one of your original funds, which is a little less exciting, some would say, but actually not really recently because it's been delivering really nice gains. I'm talking about BAR, your gold ETF. This has been performing actually pretty well, and gold is one of the best performing assets of the year. It's up 11% year to date, strongly outperforming Bitcoin, which is sometimes considered a rival safe haven. What's going on with gold, and do you think it can continue higher, potentially surpassing $3,000 per ounce?
Yeah, I mean, I think that this is the type of environment that I've been talking about that investors have been looking for a while. So the type of environment specifically where fear really enters people's thinking as investment managers or asset allocators, and the fear stokes that motivation to put capital to work and to move money to go risk off. And the environment that we've been in is very much risk off environment with the geopolitical concerns, the tariff, the trade war talks, which has 100% benefited gold and clearly hammered the likes of Bitcoin, which is very much a risk on asset. So this type of environment, people are looking for a bit of certainty in the portfolio. Gold has been on a rally now for the last few years. And this uncertainty that we're seeing in the market is just sort of helping to cement the demand for gold even more. So I think the narrative around tariffs, meaning inflation being stickier than perhaps people thought, interest rates perhaps remaining higher than people thought, volatility maybe being higher than people thought, all of this sort of sticks into the risk-off narrative, of which gold is that diversifier away from stocks and bonds that doesn't have any counterparty or credit risk.
Last question, Will. Obviously, you have a very eclectic mix of ETFs in your lineup. What else can we expect from GraniteShares going forward? Are we going to see more single stock ETFs, or will we see other types of ETFs as well?
We'll definitely see more single stocks because that has been a big growth area. But the one big growth area I think for 2025, Samit, is that we're putting a lot of effort into our YieldBOOST family. And YieldBOOST is our name for a family of ETFs that have high yields or generate high yields from selling options. So it's in the options income category. And YieldBOOST, the particular twist is that YieldBOOST ETFs generate high level of yield by selling options linked to leveraged ETFs. So if you think of a option linked to just a regular stock or regular ETF, has a certain implied volatility. If you're talking about a 2x ETF or a 3x ETF, you could have potentially 2 or 3 times the implied volatility, and therefore the potential for 2 or 3 times the amount of yield. So if you look at TSYY, which is the first YieldBOOST ETF that we launched, we just did the February distribution, which came at the end of February, and that's on an annualized yield at the moment of just over 160%. So that is a crazy amount of yield that is being paid out. So TSYY linked to an underlying leveraged Tesla single stock ETFs. And then we just launched YSPY and TQQY, and those are the YieldBOOST ETFs that are selling options on underlying leveraged ETFs linked to a 3x NASDAQ 100 and 3x S&P 500. So again, you're talking about getting that exposure in a similar way to you see some other strategies, but with much more yield potentially based upon the NASDAQ and S&P 500 underlying leveraged ETFs.
Fantastic. Well, we'll keep a close eye on those ETFs. Will, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on the show. Thanks so much for your time.
Thanks, Samit. Great to see you again.